What would you do if your entire legacy, everything you'd worked for, was threatened not by competition, but by prejudice at 30,000 feet? Imagine sitting in your hard-earned first-class seat, only to be told you don't belong, not because of your ticket, but because of who you are. This is the story of Adrian Bennett, a brilliant CEO whose calm resolve will be tested in front of a plane full of strangers. When a powerful woman's entitlement collides with his quiet dignity, the entire airline industry is about to change forever. But how did a single flight spark a movement for justice? And in the face of humiliation and bias, will dignity be enough to break a lifetime of unspoken rules? As the engines roar and the world starts watching, every choice Adrian makes sends ripples far beyond the cabin walls. What will it cost him to stay composed? Can one man's courage really ground a system built to keep him in his place? Get ready for a story of confrontation, courage, and transformation at 30,000 feet. If you believe in the power of dignity over discrimination, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because this is a story you won't want to miss. The moment the first drop of red wine splashed onto Adrian Bennett's expensive suit, the entire first-class cabin seemed to freeze in time. Every detail burned itself into his memory, the cold weight of liquid soaking through Italian wool, the gas from a man across the aisle, the sharp smell of fruit and tannin mixing with clean airplane air. Adrian stood very still, one hand gripping the back of the seat he was supposed to occupy. His other hand curled gently around his leather briefcase, knuckles almost white. Around him, there was a hush, the strange silence of collective discomfort. He heard the quick snap of a phone camera, the low buzz of a passenger whispering, "Is this really happening?" Across two seats sat Paige Landry, a woman in her early 40s with golden hair perfectly blown out and a tan blanket stretched possessively across both seat cushions. Her face was a careful mask of polite surprise. The designer bag at her feet seemed to take up as much space as she did. She didn't apologize. Not really. Her words, offered in a voice sweetened for public consumption, slipped out almost lazily. "Oh dear, I'm so sorry. That was an accident." The apology was not for Adrian. Not truly. It was for the audience. The flight attendant, Sierra Collins, moved in quickly with a handful of napkins, her brown eyes wide with worry. "Let me help you, sir." "I'm so sorry," she said, pressing the napkins into Adrian's hand. He managed a polite nod, swallowing the anger that threatened to rise. All the while, Paige didn't move her blanket. She didn't move her bag. Her blue eyes flicked from Adrian's stained jacket to the people watching, to her phone, to Sierra. There was a flicker of something like satisfaction on her lips, the kind of look Adrian had seen before, though not always this openly displayed. For a moment, he considered letting it go. He was tired. It had already been a long morning. But then he saw the young black pilot, Jordan Avery, pausing at the cockpit door, concern written across his face. Jordan looked at Adrian and then away, as if uncertain if he should get involved. Adrian recognized that look. He'd worn it himself, years ago, before he learned how to navigate rooms where no one wanted him to belong. Someone in the cabin coughed. A man with silver hair in one seat pulled out his phone, and Adrian saw the red recording light. Time seemed to slow as Adrian weighed his options. He could demand that Paige be moved. He could demand the captain intervene. He could lose his composure. He had every right to. But the old voice inside him, his mother's voice, urged patience. "Sometimes dignity is the sharpest sword," she used to say, "and you'll need it more than anger ever will serve you." The engines of the North Star Airlines jet purred under the floor. Boarding was still underway. In the background, Adrian heard the distant clink of glasses, the professional cadence of Sierra's voice greeting other passengers. He wiped his hands, careful not to stain his wedding ring, and turned to Sierra. "Thank you." "It's all right," he said softly. "The words for her ears alone. But I think we've moved past the point where napkins will fix this." Paige Landry turned her attention to her phone, thumbs moving in a flurry of texts, pointedly ignoring the chaos she had just created. "You know, I'm a nervous flyer," she said. "Loud enough for the row behind to hear. I just need a little extra space. It's not like it's such a big deal." Adrian inhaled deeply, letting the air expand his lungs, holding it, letting it out slowly. He glanced at the seat number embroidered in silver on the headrest 2A. His seat. He had purchased it weeks ago, specifically for this flight, for this conference, for this moment. Every detail of this trip had been planned. He needed to arrive in Portland ready, not drenched in red wine, not marked by public humiliation. He looked around. Several passengers averted their gaze. Others stared back, some with empathy, some with curiosity. The recording light on the phone across the aisle didn't waver. "Excuse me," Adrian said to Paige, "but this is my assigned seat. I need to sit here." She didn't even look up. "I already told the attendant I need both seats. I get anxious when I fly. You'll have to ask someone else to move." She hugged her blanket tighter, a gesture that looked almost rehearsed. Sierra hesitated. The rules were clear, but Adrian could see the conflict in her eyes. He wondered if she, too, had dealt with customers like Paige before, the ones who always seemed to get what they wanted with just the right tone, just the right threat of escalation. A ripple of energy passed through the cabin as a new passenger boarded. The world outside the aircraft faded into the background. Adrian watched the scene unfold from a strange distance, as if he were an actor reciting lines in a play he hadn't auditioned for. He could feel his pulse in his temples, the slow drumbeat of humiliation and rage. He thought about Noah Sinclair, his longtime assistant, waiting to hear that Adrian had boarded safely. He thought about his team in Hampton, about the speech he was to deliver at the Visionary Flight Conference. He thought about his mother, about his father, about every moment in his life that had taught him that the fight for dignity was endless and exhausting. And he thought, what if I do nothing? What if I let her win? Just this once, because it would be easier than the alternative. What would that teach the people? Watching the ones filming, the ones listening, the ones who might face this themselves one day. The silence was deafening. Adrian reached into his inside pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his voice. But as he spoke, his words were measured, clear, and heavy with meaning. "Yes, this is Adrian Bennett. I'm on North Star Flight 325 to Portland. There's an urgent issue you'll want to address immediately." 5 minutes later, the gentle hum of the engines faded. The lights flickered. A ripple of confusion washed through the cabin. Passengers looked up as the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, steady but tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are temporarily pausing all departures. Please remain in your seats while we resolve a situation on board." Adrian set his phone on his knee. He looked out the window, feeling the entire weight of the moment pressing down. Paige finally looked at him, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. All around them, the world watched and waited. This was only the beginning. Hours before Adrian Bennett ever set foot on North Star Flight 325, before the sharp scent of red wine and the hush of the first-class cabin, the day had begun with a different kind of quiet. in his penthouse apartment in downtown Hampton. Adrian awoke at 5 o'clock, long before the city's rhythm had found its pace. The windows glowed faint blue, with the earliest hint of sunrise, reflecting off polished floors and minimalist decor. Adrian lay in bed for a moment, listening to the soft tick of the wall clock, letting his mind gently arrange the day ahead. His mother's framed photograph sat on the nightstand. It was her eyes, kind and quietly resolute, that often greeted him first each morning. He found a measure of comfort in that, the anchor of memory reminding him who he was and what he carried. He slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the stillness. In the kitchen, the coffee maker gurgled to life with a familiar song. He stretched, flexing the tightness from his shoulders, then turned on the speaker system. The mellow notes of a jazz saxophone drifted through the room. It was a ritual, as necessary as breathing. He prepared a simple breakfast oatmeal, berries, black coffee food that reminded him of leaner years when every dollar counted and nothing was wasted. The day's agenda was stacked with purpose. The Visionary Flight Conference in Portland was more than just another industry summit. Adrian's company, Bennett Technologies, was set to unveil a software innovation that could change the way airlines handled fuel efficiency and passenger data. A breakthrough that would benefit not just North Star Airlines, but carriers across the country. If the demonstration succeeded, the impact would ripple through the entire industry, reducing costs and, more importantly, opening doors for minority-owned suppliers in aviation. His phone vibrated with a message. Noah Sinclair, his executive assistant and friend of 12 years, had already sent the day's first update. Conference organizers confirmed your keynote slot. Car is downstairs at 6:15. Weather clear. I'll be on standby for any issues. Adrian allowed himself a small smile. Noah was a lifeline in turbulent times, organized, loyal, always thinking 3 moves ahead. It had been Noah who convinced Adrian to take a risk on their first big government contract years ago, and Noah who now kept the engine of the company running while Adrian steered its direction. Showered, dressed, and double-checking his briefcase. Adrian paused in the entryway. He ran his fingers across the spine of a battered copy of Invisible Man that sat among newer hardcovers. He thought about the years it took for him to believe he truly belonged in these rooms of power. There were days he still doubted it, days when a look or a question could cut deeper than any headline. He closed his eyes, breathed in, let it go. In the elevator, descending into the garage, he checked the conference materials on his tablet, the slideshow, the data projections, the video animations, all precise, all practiced. But Adrian's mind drifted back to his mother's voice, quiet but insistent. Remember, son, the world doesn't owe you kindness. You make your place in it every day. His driver, a friendly woman named Teresa, greeted him at the curb. The car ride was peaceful, the city's skyline still shimmering with a sleepy golden haze. Adrian and Teresa chatted briefly about her grandson's upcoming graduation, about Hampton's stubborn spring rains, about nothing that would break the calm before a high-stakes day. They arrived at the airport as the first rays of sunlight warmed the glass facade of North Star's terminal. Adrian thanked Teresa and stepped out, the overnight bag slung across his shoulder, briefcase in hand. He paused for a moment, taking in the familiar swirl of travelers, the hum of voices, the sense of motion everywhere. At the security checkpoint, Adrian was greeted with a flash of recognition by one of the TSA officers. "Morning, Mr. Bennett?" Heading out for work again. Adrian nodded with a polite smile. Portland this time. Busy week ahead. The officer smiled, But as Adrian presented his first-class ticket, the smile faded into something more professional, slightly distant. Adrian had seen that look before. He braced himself for the little indignities, the double checks, the searching eyes, the pause that lasted just a moment too long. He complied with every request, patient and practiced. Another passenger in line, a businessman in a gray suit, was waved through with only a cursory glance at his documents. Adrian met the man's eyes for a second, saw the flicker of understanding. Or maybe it was just surprise. The moment passed, inside the terminal. Adrian found a quiet corner and reviewed his talking points again. His mind drifted to the conference's stakes, but also to the personal history he brought into every room. It was never just about business. It was about changing narratives about possibility and proof. His phone buzzed again. NOAA board members from Western Aviation are in Portland already. They're looking forward to your session. Adrian replied with a thumbs up, though his mind was far away. He wondered if his mother would have been proud. He thought about the miles he'd traveled, the rooms he'd entered where people looked at him and saw either a threat or a token. He thought about the weight of his own expectations, heavier sometimes than the expectations of others. For a moment, Adrian let himself imagine the conference, the applause, the announcement of the partnership that could shift the entire industry's compass. He let himself believe it would all go well. A voice called his name, drawing him out of his thoughts. Adrian. He looked up to see Jordan Avery, the young pilot he'd mentored at an aviation diversity event last year. Jordan was in full uniform, his confidence bright and genuine. "Mr. Bennett, I just wanted to say I saw you on the manifest and hoped I'd get to say thank you in person. That internship changed my life." Adrian smiled, warmth blooming in his chest. "It's good to see you. Jordan, are you flying today?" Jordan nodded, grinning. "I'm co-pilot on a West Coast route. Maybe I'll see you on board." They shook hands, an exchange unspoken between them, a recognition, a shared burden, a brief moment of pride. As Jordan walked away, Adrian felt a flicker of hope rise above the static of nerves and expectation. Maybe today would be the day everything changed. Maybe, just maybe, the old patterns would finally break. But as he made his way toward the lounge, he couldn't help but feel the old anxiety coiling in his chest, a reminder that on days like these, nothing was guaranteed. Adrian Bennett stood near the departures board, waiting for his flight to be called. In the distance, the gentle clatter of suitcase wheels rolled over polished airport tiles, a chorus of travelers moving toward unknown destinations. He glanced at his watch. Still over an hour before boarding would begin. Time enough to let his mind drift, to observe, to steady himself. The terminal hummed with the usual business families huddling together near outlets, solo travelers nursing tall coffees, children pressing faces to the glass, hoping for a glimpse of a jetliner's nose. Adrian sat quietly, suit jacket draped over his lap, phone in hand, but untouched. He watched, not just as a passenger, but as someone used to reading the silent codes of public spaces. His gaze settled on a young woman with tired eyes, struggling to keep a toddler occupied as she fumbled for her boarding passes. Nearby, a pair of businessmen laughed too loudly about market numbers, their voices filling the corner with easy confidence. Adrian envied them for a moment the casual way they owned the space, never doubting they belonged. His own sense of belonging was never automatic. It was something he cultivated, rehearsed, protected. Every trip through the airport was a reminder of how thin the line was between welcome and suspicion. A low announcement echoed overhead. naming flights to Chicago, Dallas, San Diego. Adrian's mind wandered briefly to Portland, to the visionary flight conference, to the opportunity that waited if all went as planned. He had prepared for years for a seat at this table, and now he felt the old weight returning, the one that pressed on his chest before every big moment, that asked if he was truly ready. His phone buzzed, a text from Noah Sinclair, crisp and to the point as always. Security footage will be reviewed for the fuel audit demo. Legal team says you're in the clear. Board member Ellis confirmed for dinner Thursday. All set on my end. Adrian typed a quick thanks, feeling reassured by Noah's steady presence behind the scenes. He tucked the phone away and rose, deciding to get a coffee before heading to the lounge. As he approached the coffee stand, a group of airline employees clustered near the counter, deep in conversation. They parted when Adrian arrived. One, a tall man in a navy suit, gave him a polite, if distracted, nod. Adrian ordered a black coffee, feeling the familiar sensation of being noticed and not noticed at the same time. His skin, his tailored suit, the quiet efficiency with which he moved, none of it seemed quite enough to erase the question he often saw in strangers' eyes. "What brings you here? Are you sure you belong?" He stepped aside, sipping his coffee, watching a TSA officer scan boarding passes at the priority security lane. The line was short, reserved for first-class and platinum members. Adrian joined the line, feeling both relief and the beginning of a familiar discomfort. When it was his turn, he handed over his ticket and ID to the officer, a woman in her 50s with a careful smile. She examined his documents for a moment longer than necessary. Her eyes flicked up, then down, then up again. "First class, Mr. Bennett?" He nodded, smiling politely. "Yes, that's correct." She hesitated, then called over a colleague without explanation. The second officer, a younger man, glanced at Adrian's documents and back at Adrian, as if measuring him against an invisible checklist. The pause stretched. Behind Adrian, he could feel the tension in the line growing. Passengers shifting their weight, someone sighing audibly. He felt the heat crawl up his neck, but kept his posture steady. Finally, the original officer returned his documents. "Thank you for your patience. Mr. Bennett, have a good flight." Adrian nodded, masking the familiar sting of the encounter. He stepped through the metal detector, placed his briefcase on the belt, and waited while the agents performed an additional swab of his laptop. A businessman 2 places behind him breezed through with barely a glance at his bag. On the other side, Adrian gathered his belongings, took another steadying breath, and looked back once, just to see if anyone else noticed. He caught the eye of a middle-aged black woman, herself waiting in the standard security line. Their gaze met for an instant, a silent exchange of understanding, a shared recognition that some doors opened slower than others. Adrian made his way toward the North Star Airlines lounge, trying to shake off the moment. He wanted to arrive at the conference unburdened, but the reminders were everywhere, subtle, coded, polite on the surface, but sharp underneath. Inside the lounge, the space was quieter, more reserved. Leather chairs, soft lighting, news screens muted above a marble counter. Adrian scanned his digital pass at the entrance. The attendant offered a practiced smile and directed him to the private business section. He nodded his thanks and found a seat near the window. He sat for a long while, watching the runway, letting the engine noise and the slow ballet of ground crews calm his nerves. He pulled out his laptop and reviewed the slides again, but his focus wavered. The taste of bitterness lingered from the checkpoint. but he tried to set it aside. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Adrian Bennett?" He looked up to see Sierra Collins, the flight attendant who would later play such a crucial role in the events to come. She wore the North Star uniform with an easy confidence, her smile genuine. "I just wanted to let you know we're honored to have you on board today, Mr. Bennett. If there's anything you need before the flight, please let me know." Adrian felt his mood lift. "Thank you, Sierra. I appreciate it. Just looking forward to a smooth journey." She nodded and moved off, tending to other guests. Adrian watched her for a moment, feeling gratitude for her warmth, a reminder that not everyone in these spaces saw him as an outsider. He returned to his notes, trying to focus on the task ahead. His mind, however, kept circling back to the encounters he'd just endured. How many times would he have to repeat these same small battles? How often would he have to swallow pride, choosing peace over conflict for the sake of progress? A shadow fell over his table. He looked up to see Paige Landry standing nearby, a look of amused skepticism on her face as she surveyed the lounge. She adjusted her sunglasses, her presence loud even in silence. "You'd think for the price, they'd keep this place more exclusive," she remarked to no one in particular. Her gaze lingered on Adrian for a heartbeat too long. He closed his laptop, setting his mind. The next battle was about to begin, whether he wanted it or not. The North Star Airlines first-class lounge was designed to impress dark wood accents, soft carpets underfoot, ambient jazz drifting from invisible speakers. Yet beneath the elegant surfaces, the atmosphere always hummed with quiet rivalry. Status was the currency here, and everyone seemed eager to protect their claim. Adrian Bennett entered with a careful composure, his briefcase tucked close, taking a seat near the window overlooking the tarmac. He chose a small table half-shadowed from the main thoroughfare, a spot that offered a sense of peace. He powered up his laptop and glanced over the slides for his keynote, eyes drifting now and then to the jets rolling by below. Outside, the sun caught on a row of silver fuselages. For a moment, he lost himself in the dance of vehicles and bright-jacketed workers orchestrating takeoffs and landings. He thought about the journey that had brought him here from his childhood home in Hampton to boardrooms in Manhattan, always moving, always adapting. A familiar ache pressed at his temples. Adrian pinched the bridge of his nose, willing the headache to recede. He reminded himself to savor these quiet stretches before the turbulence of the day. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook from his briefcase, flipping to a page filled with his mother's looping handwriting. She had once told him to write 3 things he was grateful for each morning. He had not always kept up the ritual, but today he paused to add 3 words in neat script family: perseverance, hope. His phone vibrated again. Noah Sinclair's text flashed across the screen. "Just checked your slides. They're perfect. Don't forget to eat something before the flight. You need energy more than nerves." Adrian smiled to himself and replied, "I'll try. Thanks for looking out." He stood and made his way to the buffet, selecting fruit, yogurt, and a pastry. As he poured a cup of coffee, the hum of conversation rose nearby. Paige Landry's voice cut through the lounge, clipped and impatient. "Can someone get me a real glass? This is first class, not a cafeteria." Adrian looked up to see her waving down a lounge attendant with a casual flick of her wrist. She wore a cream cashmere sweater and gold earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. Her movements were practiced, her tone edged with entitlement. Paige perched herself at a table with 2 empty seats, then spread her designer blanket and handbag across both, staking a claim as visible as a flag. He carried his breakfast back to his table, resolving not to let her presence unsettle him. Still, her voice carried. "It's just absurd," Paige said to no one in particular, as she scrolled through her phone. "They keep letting anyone in these days. It used to be you could count on a certain standard. Now I feel like I'm sitting in a bus station." She laughed, a brittle sound, and looked directly at Adrian. He offered her a brief nod, nothing more, then looked away. He thought of his mother again, her advice on facing people like Paige. There will always be those who see your presence as an intrusion. Let your excellence be your answer. He forced himself to focus on the slides graphs, market forecasts, environmental impact projections. The numbers were clear and strong, the kind of evidence he hoped would speak louder than any prejudice. The lounge attendant returned with Paige's glass, bending over the table with a polite murmur. Paige did not thank her. She simply took the glass and turned her attention back to her phone. A pair of travelers, an elderly couple, entered the lounge and paused near Paige's table. The man hesitated, gesturing toward one of the empty seats beside her. Paige glanced up and shook her head, sliding her blanket further across the chair. "Sorry, these are taken." The couple moved on, murmuring quietly. Adrian felt his jaw tense. He turned his attention back to his notes. But he couldn't shake the sense that he was being watched, measured. His thoughts drifted to the visionary flight conference, to the possibility of new partnerships, the doors that could open for his company and others like it. He wondered if any of that would ever be enough to silence the doubt Paige's words seemed designed to stir. Jordan Avery, the young pilot from earlier, entered the lounge, scanning the room until he saw Adrian. He approached with a respectful nod. "Mr. Bennett, good to see you again. Just wanted to wish you luck with the conference. If you're on Flight 325, I'll be in the cockpit." Adrian's mood lifted a little. "Thank you. Jordan, you'll do great up there." Jordan smiled, then headed toward the crew area. The exchange felt like a reminder Adrian was not alone in these spaces. There were others watching, learning, believing that change was possible. Paige's voice interrupted his thoughts again. "Apparently, everyone is a VIP now. That's the problem with these loyalty programs. Standards go right out the window." Adrian closed his laptop with gentle finality. He had prepared all he could for the conference. Now, the greater test would be to hold his composure through the next few hours. He thought about texting Noah for a last word of encouragement, but decided against it. Some moments required you to stand alone. A boarding announcement sounded over the lounge speakers. North Star Flight 325 to Portland. First class and priority boarding now open. Adrian gathered his things and rose, squaring his shoulders. He walked past Paige's table. She looked up, their eyes meeting briefly. There was a flicker of something cold and assessing in her gaze. Adrian kept walking, refusing to let her have the last word. In the corridor toward the gate, he saw Sierra Collins standing by the boarding door, greeting passengers with a smile that seemed entirely genuine. As Adrian approached, she offered a respectful nod. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Bennett. We're glad to have you with us." Adrian nodded in return, a quiet strength settling in his chest. He handed over his boarding pass, ready to face whatever turbulence the day might hold. The walk from the lounge to the boarding gate always felt like crossing an invisible threshold. Adrian Bennett moved with quiet confidence, his briefcase steady in one hand, overnight bag slung over his shoulder. The boarding area was a chorus of beeps and murmurs, the final scramble of travelers making ready to leave one world and enter another. At the gate, a small line had already formed for first class and priority boarding. Paige Landry stood near the front, arms folded, her gold earrings flashing as she angled her head toward the boarding agents. She seemed impatient, tapping her foot in a subtle but insistent rhythm. Her blanket was now draped over her forearm, handbag looped defiantly on her elbow. Her voice floated above the crowd, all directed at no one and everyone. If you value your best customers, you should board us first. I cannot be late for my connections. The gate agent, a young man with a calm face, maintained his professional tone. First-class boarding will begin in just a moment. Ms. Landry, thank you for your patience. Adrian waited a few steps behind, watching the interaction without inserting himself. He was no stranger to these small power plays at the boarding gate. He had learned, over countless flights, to read the energy in the air the way authority was asserted and surrendered, sometimes in the smallest of gestures. When boarding was finally announced, Paige pushed forward ahead of an elderly couple who were struggling with a walker. The couple hesitated, looking to the agent for help. Adrian stepped aside, letting them pass before him, offering a quiet nod. The woman smiled her gratitude. "Thank you, sir." Adrian returned the smile, feeling the old lessons of his mother echo in his heart. Always help when you can, no matter how small the gesture. Inside the jetway, the air was cooler, tinged with the faint scent of jet fuel and recycled air. Adrian took a breath, steadying himself for the journey ahead. Sierra Collins greeted each passenger at the cabin door with her practiced, genuine smile. When Adrian approached, she straightened, her voice warm. "Welcome aboard. Mr. Bennett, your seat is 2A, just to your right." "Thank you, Sierra," Adrian replied, appreciating her professionalism. He walked down the aisle, the plush first-class cabin unfolding before him, wide leather seats, soft overhead lighting, the quiet promise of comfort. Adrian moved with purpose, scanning the seat numbers as he reached row 2. He stopped. His seat 2A was occupied. Paige Landry sat comfortably, legs crossed, her blanket and bag sprawled across both 2A and 2B. Her phone was out, and she barely glanced up as Adrian stood beside the row. "Excuse me," Adrian said gently, holding up his boarding pass. "I believe you are in my seat. I am assigned to 2A. Paige did not look up from her phone. "These seats are both taken," she said, as if reciting a line rehearsed many times before. "I told the attendant I get anxious flying. I need the extra space." Adrian kept his tone even, though his chest tightened. "I understand, but I reserved seat 2A weeks ago. My boarding pass," he held it up for her to see, "confirms it." She finally looked at him, her gaze cool and unyielding. "Surely there's another seat somewhere for you, or maybe the flight attendant can sort it out." "I am not moving." Passengers began to notice. The man in 1C, the same one who had filmed earlier in the lounge, lifted his phone just slightly, screen angled toward the exchange. Others watched in uncomfortable silence. Adrian looked for Sierra. She approached, sensing the shift in the cabin's energy. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice calm. "This gentleman claims I'm in his seat," Paige said before Adrian could respond. "But I already explained I have a condition. I need extra space. Surely you can accommodate." Sierra looked at Adrian, then at Paige, then back at the boarding passes. "I'm sorry, Ms. Landry, but your ticket is for seat 2B, the aisle. Mr. Bennett is assigned to 2A, the window. I'll need to ask you to move your belongings to your assigned seat." Paige bristled, her cheeks coloring. "Do you know who my husband is? He's a longtime friend of North Star's board." "I shouldn't have to explain myself." Sierra stood her ground, I understand, but our policy requires that all passengers sit in their assigned seats. If you would like additional space, you may request an upgrade in advance. At this time, I will need you to move to 2B. Adrian waited, heart thudding. He could feel the judgment, the tension radiating from every corner of the cabin. Paige slowly gathered her blanket and bag, muttering under her breath, "Standards are slipping everywhere." Sierra stepped back, giving Adrian space to stow his briefcase and settle into 2A. He sat, exhaling a breath he had not realized he was holding. Across the aisle, the man in 1C caught Adrian's eye and gave a subtle nod. Adrian nodded back, feeling both solidarity and exhaustion. As the cabin filled, the temperature seemed to shift, a quiet anticipation building. Paige continued to glare at Adrian, her presence a cold wind at his side. She draped her blanket tightly across herself, fidgeting with her phone, sighing dramatically every few minutes. Sierra came by to offer pre-flight drinks. "Would you care for some water or juice, Mr.?" Bennett Adrian managed a grateful smile. "Just water. Thank you." As Sierra poured a glass for Adrian, Paige reached across with a glass of red wine. The movement was sudden, almost careless. The wine sloshed dangerously close to Adrian's arm. Sierra's eyes widened, but Adrian remained perfectly still. "Thank you." "Sierra," he said, as the attendant handed him a napkin, "I think I have everything I need for now." Sierra lingered for a moment, as if weighing whether to say something more, then moved on. Adrian leaned back, focusing on his breath, letting the distant rumble of engines ground him. From his window seat, the world outside seemed so far away, just blue sky, streaks of clouds, and a single runway stretching toward the horizon. He closed his eyes, summoning the strength he would need for whatever came next. It happened so quickly that later, Adrian Bennett would replay it in his mind again and again, searching for the exact moment when accident became intention. The pre-flight lull had settled over the cabin. Flight attendants made their last checks. Seat belts clicked. The rustle of newspapers and the tap of keyboards filled the air. Adrian was reviewing his conference notes on his phone, trying to keep his focus on the future rather than the unease at his side. Paige Landry's mood had darkened after being asked to move. She sat stiffly in 2B, arms folded tight, phone in one hand, a glass of red wine in the other. Adrian barely registered the movement until he felt the cold shock. Paige, with a flick of her wrist, managed to tip her wine, sending a crimson wave across the armrest and onto his lap and sleeve. The splash was startling, the sensation so jarring it took him a moment to react. The dark liquid seeped into his suit, spreading like a bruise. Gas erupted around them. Sierra Collins, moving quickly from the galley, hurried over, napkins in hand. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she said, her face etched with concern. "Let me help you with that." She knelt beside him, dabbing at his sleeve and trouser leg, her fingers working quickly and gently. Paige's expression, at first flat, shifted into a look of exaggerated horror. "Oh my goodness," she said, clutching her chest. "I did not mean to do that. You startled me. I suppose you were reaching for something and it just happened." Adrian looked down at the stain, at the expensive suit now ruined by carelessness or something colder. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Accidents happen," he said quietly, but his eyes did not leave Paige's face. Paige shifted her tone, voice pitched louder for the benefit of everyone in first class. "He was hovering over me," she said. I felt threatened." "Anyone would have been startled," Sierra froze, her hands full of damp napkins, caught between duty and disbelief. Other passengers were openly staring now. The man in 1C, still filming, leaned in closer. Adrian's mind spun. There was a deep ache in his chest, a weight that was all too familiar. He was suddenly aware of every detail, the way the wine had splattered on his lapel, the stairs, the tension thickening the air. For a heartbeat, he thought about standing up, demanding the page be removed, letting the full force of his anger speak for him. Instead, he pressed his hands into his thighs, grounding himself. He remembered his mother's voice, that quiet command to never let rage make him small. Sierra tried again, her tone professional. "Is there anything else I can get for you? Mr. Bennett Club Soda, perhaps?" For the stain, Adrian offered her a grateful nod. "Thank you, Sierra. You're doing your best. I think the suit is beyond saving." Paige was not finished. She pressed her phone to her ear, speaking into the silence of the cabin. "I need to report an incident," she announced, eyes darting to her neighbors. "I feel unsafe." This man, her words trailed off, but the message was clear. She was building a story, one she hoped would shield her from blame and cast Adrian in the worst possible light. A hush fell over the cabin. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice broke the silence. It was the elderly woman Adrian had helped at the gate. She spoke with quiet authority. "That's not what happened," she said. "This gentleman has been nothing but respectful since we boarded. I saw everything." Several other passengers nodded, some murmuring agreement. The man in 1C spoke up, holding up his phone. "I have the whole exchange recorded. There was nothing threatening about Mr. Bennett's behavior." Paige's face flushed. She glanced at her phone, fingers flying over the screen as she sent off a text. She muttered under her breath about standards, about not feeling safe, about people not knowing their place. Adrian closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the heat of humiliation, the sharpness of injustice. He wondered what his mother would do in this moment. He remembered her once saying, "Sometimes you teach people by standing your ground, and sometimes you teach them by rising above it." Captain Richard Caldwell's voice came over the intercom, firm and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a minor situation at the front of the cabin. Please remain in your seats while we address it." Sierra excused herself to consult with the captain. Paige's performance as a victim grew louder, her voice trembling as she insisted she needed to be moved, that she could not possibly remain on this flight with such hostility nearby. Adrian sat in silence, heart pounding. He looked down at his ruined suit, then at the faces around him. Some watched with sympathy, others with curiosity, and a few with naked discomfort, wishing the whole scene would simply vanish. As Sierra returned, she knelt beside Adrian once more, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "I am so sorry for all of this," she said. "I know you did nothing wrong. Please, let me know if there's anything I can do." Adrian met her eyes. "Thank you, Sierra. I know this isn't easy for you either." He watched as she stood, composed but clearly shaken. The whole cabin waited, breath held, for what would come next. Adrian's thoughts raced. He replayed the years of training, the countless moments when he had to choose between standing up for himself and protecting his future. He felt the old anger burning, the voice that said, "Enough is enough." He realized that everyone was watching: passengers, crew, the captain, and soon, perhaps, the world outside this narrow metal tube. This was not just about a seat or a suit. It was about what kind of man he wanted to be when dignity was under attack. The answer, he thought, had to be more than silence, but it could never be rage. He straightened in his seat, the storm swirling all around him, determined that the next move would be his and his alone. Adrian Bennett sat in seat 2A. The cold of the wine now dried into his clothes, the tension lingering in his bones. The first-class cabin was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant whir of luggage carts outside. Paige Landry's presence in 2B felt heavier than any physical weight, a wall of icy disdain and calculated victimhood. Her whispered calls and text messages continued, her face contorted in a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. He glanced at the window, watching the ground crew moving with purpose on the tarmac below. A tiny part of him longed to be anywhere but here. There were times, even now, when the armor he wore every day felt impossibly heavy, when he wondered if the cost of calm was too high, if keeping the peace just let others think this was acceptable. But each time the anger swelled in his chest, he heard his mother's voice. "Remember, son, rage makes you visible for all the wrong reasons. Dignity makes you unforgettable." Adrian reached for his phone, then hesitated. He could feel the eyes of the cabin on him, waiting for his next move. The man in 1C still held his phone steady, not recording now, but watching with visible concern. The elderly woman from earlier offered Adrian a small, reassuring smile. In that glance, he found a reminder of all the people who had lifted him up, who had taught him that sometimes quiet resolve could move mountains. His hand trembled as he scrolled through his contacts. For a moment, he hesitated on Noah Sinclair's name. Noah would know what to say, would remind him that this moment was bigger than a seat, a suit, or a stain. But something in Adrian resisted the urge to call for comfort. This time, the decision had to be his alone. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, letting the anxiety crest and pass. The whispering in the cabin grew louder as Sierra Collins reappeared, her face set with determination. She leaned close, her voice low enough that only Adrian could hear. "Mr. Bennett, Captain Caldwell would like a word with you at the front of the cabin. If you would prefer, I can stay with your belongings." Adrian nodded, grateful for her professionalism. He stood, gathering himself, and walked past Paige, who made a point of shrinking away as if he were contagious. Her performance had not faded. She cast nervous glances at other passengers, hoping for support. At the front of the cabin, Captain Richard Caldwell waited, his uniform immaculate, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "Mr. Bennett," he began, "thank you for your patience during this incident. I want you to know that we are investigating thoroughly, and we take all passenger concerns seriously." Adrian met the captain's gaze, refusing to shrink. "I appreciate your attention, Captain, but I want to be clear. I have done nothing to warrant being treated as a threat. I simply asked for the seat I paid for. I expect to be treated with the same respect as any other first-class passenger." Captain Caldwell nodded, listening. "Mr. Bennett, I believe you. Several passengers have spoken up on your behalf. We are also reviewing footage and statements. However, Ms. Landry insists she feels unsafe. In situations like this, protocol often suggests removing both parties, but that does not feel right given the circumstances." Adrian's shoulders slumped slightly. He had heard that line before, had felt its edge. Equal blame, equal removal, never equal justice. He pressed his lips together, searching for the right response. Before he could answer, the cabin door opened and Jordan Avery, the young pilot Adrian had mentored, stepped in. "Captain, we have a call from corporate," he said quietly. "It is urgent. They want to speak with you and Mr. Bennett immediately." Adrian's stomach twisted. Was this the moment when the situation spiraled out of his control? He followed the captain and Jordan to a small crew area, away from prying eyes. Captain Caldwell answered the secure line. The conversation was brief, measured. Adrian listened as Caldwell's tone shifted from defensive to attentive, then to outright concern. "Thank you, sir. I understand," the captain said finally. "We will comply immediately." He ended the call, then turned to Adrian. His expression changed. "Mr. Bennett, I have just been informed that you are a principal stakeholder in North Star's parent company. Is that correct?" Adrian nodded. "That is correct. Captain, I have a responsibility to this airline not just as a passenger, but as someone who cares deeply about its values." Captain Caldwell's posture changed. His voice softened. "Sir, with your permission, I would like to formally pause the flight and address the entire crew. This incident requires more than a standard response." Adrian felt a wave of relief and resolve. He had not wanted to pull rank, to reveal his power just to solve a personal slight. But something in him shifted. This was about more than his own comfort. This was about making sure that dignity was not optional, not a luxury that could be stolen by a single entitled voice. "Please do." "Captain," Adrian replied, "it is time this airline stands for something better." As the captain moved to the cockpit, Jordan placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder. "Thank you for standing up. Mr. Bennett, we need to see that it's possible." Adrian looked at the young man, seeing in him a version of himself from years ago, hopeful, ambitious, but always aware of how quickly hope could be crushed by the careless actions of others. "Thank you, Jordan," Adrian said quietly. "You remind me why I keep fighting." He returned to his seat, the eyes of the cabin following his every move. Paige watched him with open disbelief, her authority unraveling. He sat down, closed his eyes, and let the engines of change finally begin to turn. The next 5 minutes unfolded with a strange, breathless clarity, as if the entire world had narrowed to the first-class cabin and the long steel tube of North Star Flight 325. Adrian Bennett sat upright in 2-0, heart thudding in his chest, as the gentle hum of engines suddenly faded to an uneasy silence. Across the aisle, the man in 1C whispered to his wife, his phone ready in his lap. Passengers craned their necks, sensing something unusual was happening, the mood changing with every second of uncertainty. Paige Landry fidgeted with her phone, her act of indignation dissolving into anxiety as she saw the cabin crew conferring urgently at the front. Captain Richard Caldwell's voice soon filled the cabin, calm but unmistakably serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an unexpected operational review, we have been instructed to temporarily pause all departures. Please remain seated as we address a customer service situation. We appreciate your patience and cooperation." A wave of confusion rolled through the cabin, followed by a rising buzz of speculation. Was there a safety issue? A technical glitch? Some passengers looked annoyed, others worried. A few, especially those who had witnessed the earlier scene, seemed to understand that something deeper was unfolding. Sierra Collins moved quietly through the aisle, her professional mask unshaken. She stopped by Adrian's seat. "Mr. Bennett, we have paused the flight as requested. Is there anything else you would like me to do at this moment?" Adrian shook his head, his voice low but certain. "Thank you, Sierra. You have handled all of this with more grace than anyone should ever have to show." A ripple of relief moved through her features. She leaned in. "I wish we had more passengers who remembered that dignity is a two-way street. Nearby." Paige pressed her phone to her ear again, her voice barely above a hiss. "You need to call someone," she whispered. "Tell them I am being harassed. I do not feel safe. I am going to miss my meeting in Portland, and this is unacceptable." Her tone was increasingly frantic, the authority she had wielded slipping through her fingers like sand. At the front of the cabin, Captain Caldwell and Jordan Avery conferred quietly with a ground operations manager who had hurried onto the plane. Their words were hushed, but Adrian could see the seriousness in their faces. A few rows back, the elderly woman Adrian had helped at the gate leaned forward to address her husband in a steady tone. "That young man has been nothing but respectful," she said, a clear note of support intended for anyone who might be listening. "If anyone deserves to fly today, it is him." The air in the cabin grew thick with anticipation. The news of the flight's sudden grounding traveled fast. Adrian could see passengers peering over seats, some opening their phones to check social media, others texting family or work with updates. The tension was tangible, every second stretching a little longer than the last. Back at the terminal, airport staff rushed to field questions from connecting passengers and those waiting for delayed departures. Agents gathered in tight circles, radios crackling. The news that all North Star flights had been halted for an operational review was met with disbelief and, for some, growing concern. Adrian sat in the center of it all, the pressure of the moment threatening to crush him. He was aware of every detail, the quiet click of a pen, the faint hum of the air system, the whispered questions, and the mounting uncertainty. For a moment, he doubted himself. Had he gone too far? Would this cost him? His company? Even the hope for change he carried on his shoulders. He glanced at his phone and considered calling Noah Sinclair, his executive assistant, for reassurance. But then he remembered the faces that had spoken up for him, the elderly woman, the man in 1C, even Sierra. He remembered his mother's voice again, telling him that justice sometimes needed to be seen, not just believed. At that moment, Captain Caldwell returned to address the cabin, standing in the aisle, his voice measured and clear. "Passengers, thank you for your understanding. We are working with our corporate office to resolve a matter of customer care that has required us to ground this and all other North Star flights until further notice. We apologize for the inconvenience and will update you as soon as we are able." Paige let out an audible gasp, her hand clutching her phone so tightly that her knuckles whitened. "This is absurd," she snapped, her mask of calm gone completely. "Do you know who my husband is? This airline will hear from our lawyers." The man in 1C finally spoke up, his voice louder than before. "We all saw what happened," he said firmly. "Mr. Bennett has been nothing but polite. If anyone should be escorted off this flight, it's not him." Nods and murmurs of agreement circled through the cabin. Paige's outrage faltered, her words trailing off as she realized she no longer held the room's sympathy. Adrian felt something inside him relax, if only slightly. He allowed himself a slow breath, letting the emotion surface but not spill over. He was no longer fighting just for himself, but for everyone watching everyone who had ever been asked to move, to wait, to accept less than their due, because someone else claimed to be more deserving. The minutes ticked by. The tension in the cabin gave way to an uneasy camaraderie among the passengers. Sierra passed through again, checking on each person, her care professional, but also deeply human. Adrian caught her eye. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for standing with the truth." She offered a tired but genuine smile. "Thank you for not backing down." As ground staff began to board the plane, the final decision was made. Paige Landry, still protesting, was asked to collect her things and leave the flight. Her face burned red as she stood, drawing a storm of stares, some pitying, many relieved. As she exited, a sense of lightness swept through the cabin. The weight of injustice had lifted, if only for a moment. Captain Caldwell addressed the passengers once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and for your understanding. We are preparing to resume departures and will be airborne shortly." Adrian leaned back in his seat, the taste of vindication bittersweet on his tongue. He wondered how far the ripples of this moment would reach. He thought about his team, the conference ahead, and the possibility that something lasting could grow from a few minutes of grounded flight and a refusal to accept indignity. And for the first time since boarding, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the system could change. In the aftermath of the abrupt grounding, the news traveled faster than any aircraft. As the minutes ticked by inside North Star Flight 325, the world outside caught wind of what was happening in the skies above and on the tarmac below. What began as a tense standoff in first class now echoed far beyond the metal walls of the airplane. On board, the passengers exchanged theories, scrolling through their phones as updates flashed in real time. North Star Airlines grounds all flights pending operational review, read a breaking headline. The words stoked a mix of anxiety and curiosity. Someone in row 4 muttered about missed connections and business meetings ruined. But even those gripes were muted by a shared sense that they were witnessing something bigger than themselves. Adrian Bennett sat quietly in his seat, his suit still marked by red wine, his heart slowly settling into a steady rhythm. He watched as Sierra Collins moved up and down the aisle, checking on passengers with a patience that seemed to defy exhaustion. He admired her professionalism, how she balanced empathy and authority in a space now filled with discomfort and expectation. The cabin doors opened again as 2 North Star ground supervisors boarded, one carrying a tablet, the other a legal pad. They approached Adrian first. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for your patience. We will need a few minutes of your time after landing in Portland. Our CEO will be reaching out directly." Adrian nodded. "Of course." He understood the seriousness in their tone, the way their eyes flicked toward the seat Paige Landry had just vacated. Paige herself was now a ghostly presence in the terminal. She had been escorted out under the watchful eyes of fellow passengers, her phone still pressed to her ear as she left a trail of outrage in her wake. Outside the aircraft, the ripple became a wave. By the time she reached the main terminal, someone had already posted a blurry photo of her exit to social media. The comments poured in, some sympathetic, many scathing. The truth was out there now, documented in countless tweets, videos, and first-hand accounts. Adrian could feel the moment expanding, multiplying far beyond the confines of one flight. For every passenger, like Paige Landry, there were dozens more in the world, people who had wielded privilege like a weapon, who had never faced the consequences of their own entitlement. But now, for perhaps the first time in her life, Paige was not protected by her last name, her marriage, or her practiced victimhood. In the North Star Airlines headquarters hundreds of miles away, Richard Caldwell, recently promoted to CEO after years as a respected captain, fielded urgent calls from the board of directors, the legal team, and the press. The airline's social media team watched as hashtags began to trend, so dignity in the skies. Justice for Adrian. No more privilege. Richard stared at his reflection in his office window. He knew this was a defining moment, not only for North Star, but for the industry as a whole. He remembered the phone call that had halted all flights, the demand from the top investor. A demand born not from ego, but from exhaustion, with a system that protected some and ignored others. He picked up the phone and dialed his executive team. "We are not going to bury this," he said. "We are going to address it head on. Prepare a statement and begin immediate review of our customer service and anti-bias policies. This cannot be a one-time fix. It has to be the start of a new standard." Meanwhile, inside the plane, Adrian fielded a text from Noah Sinclair. "Are you okay? Media is reaching out. Conference organizers already heard. Call me as soon as you land," Adrian replied. "I'm holding up. Thanks for having my back." The elderly woman in the row behind him leaned over as the plane sat still at the gate. "Young man," she said softly, "you handled yourself with grace. My husband and I have flown for 60 years, and we have seen a lot. But today, you reminded us of what dignity looks like." Adrian offered her a gentle smile. "Thank you, ma'am. I just wanted to get to Portland in peace." She patted his arm. Sometimes peace has to be earned the hard way. Elsewhere in the terminal, Paige Landry's day was unraveling quickly. A North Star representative met her near the customer service desk, this time with security present. "Ms. Landry, we have reviewed the events on board. Your behavior is being referred to our executive board for further action. For now, we will be unable to accommodate you on any North Star flights until the investigation is complete." She stared, stunned, her sense of invulnerability finally cracking. "What am I supposed to do? My meeting, my reputation, my family. This is all a misunderstanding." The representative's tone was sympathetic but firm. "I understand your frustration. You are welcome to contact our headquarters. But this matter is now out of our hands." Paige sank into a seat, her phone buzzing with texts and notifications. Already, her social circle was abuzz with rumors and links. Videos of her confrontation on the plane were being shared across every platform. She scrolled in horror as friends, acquaintances, and even strangers weighed in on her character, her words, her actions. On Flight 325, the mood had shifted. There was still tension, but also a quiet pride among many passengers. Sierra brought fresh napkins and water for Adrian, her voice steady and kind. "You didn't deserve any of that," she said softly. "You set an example for the rest of us." Adrian nodded, the fatigue catching up with him. "I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to do my job and fly to a meeting." She smiled, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes the universe chooses us, whether we are ready or not." A few minutes later, the captain's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience and understanding. We will be departing for Portland shortly. Please prepare for takeoff." As the engines roared back to life, Adrian gazed out the window. The city lights blurred as the aircraft taxied to the runway. He thought about the people whose lives had intersected with his today, about the power of a single moment, a single choice, to set off a cascade of consequences. The plane lifted from the ground. The cabin lights dimmed. And for the first time since the chaos began, Adrian allowed himself to breathe, to hope that the shock waves created by his refusal to yield would not fade quietly into the background. He knew this was just the beginning. The plane soared above the clouds, the blue horizon painted with the faint gold of a fading sun. For the first time since boarding, Adrian Bennett allowed himself a moment of silence. The cabin's drama had settled into a hush, punctuated only by the soft clink of glasses and the low hum of conversation. North Star Flight 325 was finally in the air, bound for Portland and the Visionary Flight Conference, but its passengers carried the memory of the day's turmoil in every glance and whispered word. Adrian reclined in his seat, closing his eyes, but rest did not come easily. He could still feel the weight of humiliation clinging to him, the sticky residue of red wine on his suit sleeve, the echo of Paige Landry's accusations in his ears. His mind cycled through 1,000 what-ifs. What if he had lost his temper? What if no one had spoken up? What if the airline had chosen the easier route and simply asked them both to leave? He reached for his phone, drafting a message to Noah Sinclair. Still on board. We'll call you once we land. Thanks for looking after things. The words felt small compared to the magnitude of the day, but he knew Noah would understand. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Bennett, is there anything else I can get you? Sierra Collins stood in the aisle, her hands folded gently at her waist. Adrian looked up at her, reading the concern in her eyes. No, thank you. Sierra, I think I just need a little quiet, he replied. Of course, she said, but you should know the crew, the other passengers. We noticed how you handled everything. That matters more than you realize. He nodded, offering her a tired but genuine smile. It was not the recognition he had ever wanted, but in this moment, it felt like a lifeline. Across the aisle, the man in 1C finally put away his phone, turning to Adrian with a look of sincere admiration. I have traveled for years, he said quietly. I have never seen anyone keep their dignity under fire the way you did today. If you ever need a witness, you have my name. Thank you, Adrian replied. Sometimes all you can do is stand still and let the truth speak for itself. The elderly woman a few rows back reached for her husband's hand. She whispered, Maybe this is how things change. One seat at a time. As the plane sped westward, Adrian let the hum of the engine soothe him. He thought about the days when traveling by air had felt like an impossible dream, when every ticket purchased was a gamble on being treated with respect. He remembered his mother's stories about buses in Hampton, about seating at the back, about learning to make yourself small and unremarkable. But he had never wanted to be unremarkable. He had wanted to lead, to build, to change the script for himself and for everyone who looked like him. And yet, for all his success, the lesson was always the same: power did not insulate him from prejudice. It only gave him a new way to respond. He turned over these thoughts, the tension and sorrow, the small victories. He wondered about Paige Landry, now left in the terminal, her world shaken and her story reframed by the day's events. He wondered if she would see herself in the videos already circulating online, or if she would double down on the narratives that had always protected her. He wondered, too, about the young pilot, Jordan Avery, who had watched everything unfold from the cockpit door. For Jordan, for every rising leader who carried hope and risk in equal measure, Adrian wanted this day to mean something more than another viral headline. He wanted it to open doors, to spark questions, to change the unspoken rules that shaped who belonged and who was merely tolerated. Sierra returned with a warm towel, a small gesture of comfort. She offered it with a gentle touch. We are about an hour from landing. Mr. Bennett, I know you have an important meeting, but if you need to change, we have a spare shirt in the crew closet. Adrian accepted the offer, changing quickly in the small lavatory. The clean shirt a welcome relief from the sticky memory of wine. As he looked at himself in the mirror, he saw both the tiredness and the resolve in his eyes. He heard his mother's voice again, as if she were standing behind him. "You do not let them decide who you are." Returning to his seat, Adrian glanced at the cabin. The passengers had shifted from discomfort to a kind of camaraderie. Some shared snacks. Others swapped stories about flights gone wrong and times they had felt powerless. For a few minutes, the cabin felt almost like a community, united by the shared experience of a day that would not be soon forgotten. He took a notebook from his bag, scribbling down thoughts and ideas, bits of his speech for the visionary flight conference now colored by the morning's events. He resolved to speak not just about efficiency and innovation, but about the value of dignity as a standard in aviation, how technology could close gaps, but hearts and minds had to close them too. As the plane began its descent, a final announcement came from Captain Caldwell. "Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your patience today. We are making our approach to Portland International. We hope that you carry with you not only memories of this flight, but a reminder of how important it is that every traveler is treated with respect. We look forward to welcoming you again." Adrian caught Sierra's eye as she passed one last time. "Thank you for everything," he said quietly. "Thank you for showing us all how to handle a storm," she replied. The wheels touched down smoothly, the familiar jolt a relief after the turbulence of the day. Adrian closed his eyes, a sense of closure settling over him. He knew the hardest conversations were yet to come, that the story would follow him beyond the jet bridge. But for now, he allowed himself to feel the victory of having stood his ground and the hope that his stand might echo, seat by seat, flight by flight, far into the future. The moment Adrian Bennett stepped off Flight 325 and into Portland International Airport, the world outside seemed both familiar and entirely new. The hum of travel, the distant beeping of carts, the murmur of announcements, the bright overhead lights was the same as always. But the mood around him buzzed with a quiet electricity, a sense that something meaningful had just unfolded at 30,000 feet. Sierra Collins met him at the door, offering a soft, steady smile. "Mr. Bennett, I wish you luck at your conference," she said. "We're proud to have flown you here." "Thank you, Sierra. I'll remember everything," he replied, his voice warm. He meant it. He stepped aside to allow the rest of the first-class passengers to disembark. Several offered small words of encouragement as they passed. The elderly woman squeezed his hand. "You did good, young man." He found his way through the corridor and toward the baggage claim. There, as Noah Sinclair had warned, a small cluster of reporters waited, camera lights already flickering to life. Some held out microphones, others waved for his attention, voices eager to cut through the airport noise. "Mr. Bennett, what happened on board Flight 325 today? Can you comment on the airline's decision to ground all flights? Do you have a response to the social media coverage?" Adrian paused, centering himself with a steadying breath. He had not sought the spotlight, but it had found him all the same. He glanced at his phone, Noah's last message still on the screen. "Whatever you say it as yourself." He faced the cameras, his voice calm but resolute. "This morning, I boarded my flight simply wanting to get to a conference and do my work. What happened on board was unfortunate, but it is not a unique experience. Too many people still face moments when their right to dignity is questioned. I am grateful to the crew, to passengers who spoke up, and to North Star for choosing to confront the issue rather than sweep it aside. I hope this becomes an opportunity for real change, not just for me, but for everyone who travels." The questions kept coming. Adrian answered what he could and declined what felt too personal. He did not mention Paige Landry by name. He did not dwell on the details of humiliation or anger. Instead, he spoke of systems and solutions, about the need for companies to build respect into their practices from the ground up. As he moved away from the cameras, Noah greeted him with a quick embrace. "You handled that perfectly," Noah said, voice full of pride. "The whole team is watching online. You have the board's support, and the conference organizers are running behind anyway. You have time to breathe." Adrian exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders. "Thank you. Noah, I'm not sure how much more attention I want, but if it helps shift the conversation, then maybe it's worth it." They found a quiet corner near the escalators, away from the reporters. Noah handed Adrian a folder conference notes, updates, a printed statement from Northstar's CEO, Richard Caldwell, who had already issued a public apology and announced a sweeping review of airline policy. Noah looked serious for a moment. "This isn't just about today. You know, we've all faced things like this in our own way. You being calm, choosing dignity, it gives people a script for what to do when the world turns unfair." Adrian nodded. He felt both the weight and the honor of it. He remembered his mother's words. Sometimes your greatest strength is simply not letting them change who you are. At that moment, his phone buzzed with a new message, this one from Richard Caldwell himself. "Adrian, thank you for your patience and your leadership today. Our board is meeting to discuss a permanent anti-bias protocol. I want to personally invite you to advise us on new training standards. We will make this right." Adrian typed a reply. "I look forward to helping however I can. Thank you for listening." They headed for the conference center, their path lined with digital ads for the Visionary Flight Conference, now displaying Adrian's name as a keynote speaker. The room he entered felt different this year. People rose as he approached, not just out of respect for his title, but for what he had just endured. The conference organizer, a tall woman with a welcoming smile, took Adrian aside. "You know, everyone is talking about your flight. Some of our partners are even asking how they can review their own travel and hospitality policies. I hope you will share your story, not just your business insights." Adrian paused. He wondered if he could. Did he want to open that part of himself to the world? Again and again, he remembered the feeling of the wine soaking into his suit, the silence of the cabin, the quiet courage it took to not lash out. He met her gaze. "I'll tell the truth," he said softly. "Maybe that's all we can do." As the day turned to evening, Adrian finally had a few moments to himself in his hotel suite. He looked out at the city lights of Portland, the river winding through the darkness. He called his mother, her voice bright with pride from Hampton. "I saw you on the news," she said. "I'm proud of you. Adrian, remember, you don't have to be strong for everyone all the time. Just be yourself." He smiled, letting his guard down for the first time in hours. "I love you, Mom. I'll be home soon." That night, social media was ablaze with clips from the press conference, from the airport, from Flight 325. People debated, argued, supported, condemned. But through it all, one theme rose, above the noise dignity. Once defended, was hard to ignore. As Adrian drifted towards sleep, he knew the story was not just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who had watched, to everyone who needed hope that things could be different. Morning light poured through the Portland skyline as Adrian Bennett rose to face a new day. The city was waking up, but the world around him already buzzed with the aftermath of yesterday's events. His phone vibrated nonstop messages of solidarity, invitations for interviews, thank yous from strangers who said they had never felt seen before. He dressed carefully for the final day of the Visionary Flight Conference, tying his favorite blue silk tie, a gift from his mother. There was a new sense of gravity to his appearance, as if he carried not just his own ambition, but a piece of hope for everyone who had ever been asked to move aside. Downstairs, the conference center was abuzz. Adrian greeted Noah Sinclair in the lobby. "You ready for this?" Noah asked, handing him a fresh coffee and a reassuring smile. "As I'll ever be," Adrian replied. The two walked side by side through corridors lined with banners touting innovation and inclusion. The organizers had given Adrian the closing keynote. Every seat in the ballroom was filled, the energy unlike any he had felt before. He took the stage, heart pounding. The audience fell silent, hundreds of faces turning to him not just as an executive or a conference headliner, but as the man from Flight 325, the man who refused to give up his seat, his dignity, his calm. He began, "Thank you for allowing me to share not just my business vision, but my lived experience. Yesterday, I was reminded that all the innovation in the world means little if we cannot guarantee basic dignity for every person. I want to talk today about what it means to build systems, businesses, and communities where everyone belongs." He recounted the story not in lurid detail, but with honesty. He spoke of the humiliation, the temptation to respond with anger, and the choice to respond instead with calm. He thanked the crew, the witnesses, even those who had opposed him, for reminding him of the power of action and accountability. He challenged every leader in the room to examine their own policies, to build processes that would prevent prejudice from going unchecked. People nodded. Some wiped away tears. In the crowd, Sierra Collins and Jordan Avery watched from the back, proud to see their story ripple out into the world. Adrian concluded, "True leadership is not about never facing conflict or bias. It is about how we respond. Every time we choose dignity over vengeance, every time we build accountability into our systems, we take another step toward the future we all deserve." He stepped down to a standing ovation. Reporters clustered nearby, but this time their questions were different. What can we do to change our own organizations? How do we teach our teams the same resilience? Backstage, Richard Caldwell, Northstar's CEO, greeted Adrian with a handshake. "Your words moved the board. Adrian, we're instituting a new dignity protocol, mandatory anti-bias training, transparent reporting systems, and a customer code of conduct. We want you as an advisor." "I'd be honored," Adrian said. He felt the weight of his fatigue, but also the first warmth of real progress. Later, Adrian joined a smaller panel discussion about equity in travel. He listened as others shared stories, some uplifting, some painful. The conversation was no longer about one flight or one incident. It was about an entire culture re-examining itself. By evening, as the conference ended, Adrian sat alone by a window overlooking the Willamette River. He watched the water glint beneath the city lights, his thoughts drifting to Hampton, to his mother, to every quiet act of courage that had brought him here. He pulled out his phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Hi, Mom. It's done. I saw you," she said, pride clear in her voice. "You spoke for more than just yourself." "I hope so," he replied. He let himself be quiet, letting her words fill the silence. "You always said the real work starts after the applause." "It does," she said. "But today, take a breath. Let yourself be proud." He did. He allowed himself to feel not just the exhaustion, but the hope that his story might help others stand their ground, that the systems would start to shift, that the next person denied a seat would not have to fight alone. before boarding his return flight? Audrian was stopped by Sierra Collins. She handed him a letter, her eyes bright. "Thank you for making my job mean more," she said. "We are already seeing changes in how we're treated. People are speaking up." Adrian smiled. "It's just the beginning. Sierra, keep pushing forward." As he settled into his seat this time, his seat was his alone. He looked out the window at the runway. The cabin crew welcomed him by name, and a few passengers gave him respectful nods. As the plane lifted into the evening sky, Adrian closed his eyes and let the hum of the engines fill his chest. He was no longer just a traveler or a CEO. He was a catalyst, a witness to the truth that dignity was worth grounding an airline for. And the movement that began with a single ruined suit and a refusal to yield had become something larger, a ripple turning into a wave, one flight, one seat, one voice at a time. As Adrian's flight soared above the clouds, it became clear this was never just about a seat or a single airline. It was about every silent moment of injustice. Every time someone's worth was questioned by ignorance or fear, Adrian's story reminds us that true strength lies not in fighting back with rage, but in standing firm with grace, so that others might not have to face the same battle alone. We leave you with a challenge. What would you do in the face of prejudice? Would you speak up, or would you stay silent? Let this story move you to defend dignity wherever you see it threatened, in your life or the lives of those around you. Because silence protects no one, and change begins with those brave enough to stand their ground. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, so more people can witness the power of justice and compassion in action. Together, we can build a world where everyone is seen, respected, and welcomed no matter where their journey begins. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more stories that challenge, inspire, and unite us all.